Welcome to Touring the AFC South. I am your host, Mike Patton. And on this episode, we're going to be talking a lot about the coaching changes in the AFC South. And I brought along someone that definitely is an aficionado of the AFC South. That would be Fox Sports Ben Arthur. What's going on, man?
What's up, Mike? Thanks for having me on again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But of course, before we start any show, I always do the get off your chest segment. Of course, this month we're doing Black History Facts, and we're gonna talk about a particular person that is actually in the NFL and is actually a coach in the NFL, but not the coach you may be thinking of. We're gonna talk about Jennifer King. Jennifer King was born on August 6th, 1984, in Eden, North Carolina, and raised in Reidsville, North Carolina. Of course, she went to Guilford College, which is Division III college in Greensboro, North Carolina, where she played college basketball and softball. And after college, she entered the Women's Football Alliance, which is the largest football league for women in the world. And basically, you play an 11 on 11, and it's physical football. It isn't the touch football. She played quarterback and wide receiver for the Carolina Phoenix from 2006 to 2017, defensive back and wide receiver for the New York Sharks in 2018, and safety for the DC Divas in 2019 before calling it a career. Now, while she was doing all this, she actually was a coach at Greensboro College for a little while. And then she also was a coach at Johnson and Wales 2016-17 and 2017-18 season. She took that program from being a program that was 2 years, being removed from just being started, to a national champion just that quick. So her coaching chops were started very, very early. Now, in 2018, she was one of 40 women to attend the NFL's Women's Forum in 2018. Let's see, she met Carolina head coach, Carolina head coach, Ron Rivera at that time. And of course, he expressed interest in hiring her. So what he did is he brought her on as an intern. And of course, he brought her on 2 seasons, 2018, 2019. Now, the 2019 season is interesting because she was an assistant wide receiver coach and special teams coach for the Arizona Hot Shots, which was the AAFL, which was very short lived, as many know. And then, of course, she came back and was a running backs intern the next year. 2018, she was the wide receivers intern. 2019, she was the running backs intern. In 2020, of course, she basically, she went to Dartmouth, was an offensive assistant there, I should say. And in 2020, Ron Rivera goes to the Washington football team. And he becomes head coach there. Of course, he remembers Jennifer King and brings her along as an intern. But she doesn't stay an intern for long. She actually gets promoted to assistant running backs coach the next season. And with that, becomes the first Black woman to become a full-time coach in the NFL. That's the Get Off Your Chest segment for this episode. Ben, did you know all those little background stories about Jennifer King?
I did not. That's very cool. I have heard Jennifer King's name come up the last few years in terms of being a pioneer, so to speak, for women in the NFL in terms of getting in the coaching space. So, that's really dope. So yeah, it's good to kind of hear that background. And obviously, in regards to Black History Month, it's a time to kind of appreciate that kind of thing. And obviously, this is the Touring the AFC South podcast, and something I just keep thinking about is just kind of the Titans' history in terms of Black quarterbacks and what they've kind of done, right? Like Steve McNair was the first Black quarterback to win NFL MVP. I believe Warren Moon was the first Black quarterback to get inducted into the Hall of Fame. And then you have Vince Young getting selected in the top 3 of the 06 draft. So it's always cool, during February to kind of recognize, Black pioneers, and obviously within the football space, I think it's a cool thing to recognize and appreciate those stories.
It definitely is, and I wish Jennifer King all the best. Hopefully, maybe she hears me talking about her someday. Who knows? But I definitely had to recognize her because she has done a tremendous job anywhere she's been, and now she is in the NFL, and I definitely had to salute her for that. Now, speaking of coaches, we're going to talk about coaches on this episode. We got a few things to talk about. Mr. D'Amico Ryans and the Texans, the Shane Steichen hire with the Colts, and of course, we have an offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans to talk about too. We're going to talk about that and more when we come back from the commercial break on Touring the AFC South with your host, Mike Patton.
Whether it's local or long distance, Milligan Logistics has you covered. Milligan Logistics was established in 2020 with over a combined 15 years of experience in trucking, hauling, and logistics, along with over 50 years collectively of project management experience. Again, whether it's near or far, Milligan Logistics has you covered with quality service, efficiency while taking pleasure in exceeding clients' expectations. Need goods moved short or long distance? Milligan Logistics has you covered. Just reach out to them at 615-354-2618.
All right, having a little bit of technical difficulties with the commercials, but hey, we'll bring them back another time. All right, so going into what I was talking about before the break, we're going to talk about coaching changes in the AFC South. And the first one that I want to talk about is D'Amico Ryans going back to his former stomping ground and becoming the head coach of the Houston Texans. Now, did you before the coaching cycle started and things like that, did you see him potentially landing with the Houston Texans?
Honestly, I hadn't really given a whole bunch of thought to it, but I knew just from kind of brief research that D'Amico had played for the Texans. I had totally forgotten that, and obviously his pedigree as a defensive coordinator has stood out. But honestly, something with the Texans job like that I kept thinking about early on was like, would they hire a third straight black coach? Like, especially would a black coach even want to take that job after hiring and canning David Culley after one season, and then hiring and canning Lovie Smith after one season? Would a great black candidate even want to go in that situation? So I think, and I even wrote stories on that. So I wasn't even D'Amico again was kind of a thought because he did play for the Texans, but because of kind of what has happened the past two seasons, I wasn't even sure that would be a direction that the Texans could go in. So those were honestly kind of my first thoughts.
Yeah, it kind of threw me off a little bit. But then when things started happening, and then one thing that kind of threw me off, I did think about the suit he had against the team at one point in time, like injury settlement, I believe. I thought that may come into play, but as I later found out, it really wasn't a factor at all when he wanted to become that head coach of that team. So kind of getting into it, his expertise is defensively. I mean, he was the coach of the best defense in the NFL. So defensively, he has a few things that he can work with. Of course, he has Derek Stingley Jr. He has a Jalen Petrie at safety, maybe a Christian Harris at linebacker, perhaps, if he can stay healthy. What else? Do you think he can kind of make things a little better there, or what else do you think he needs to kind of improve that team defensively?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, you have to start with the run defense. I mean, it was one of the worst run defenses I've seen that in terms of the Texans last season. They were giving up more than 170 rushing yards per game in 2022, which was the worst mark of any team since 2008. So they just got ran over in the trenches, kind of lacked physicality. We both know what kind of Derrick Henry has done to them historically in terms of rushing for over 200 yards and kind of that streak. And so I think first order of business is kind of fixing that. And I think his pedigree as a former Pro Bowl linebacker and kind of how good against the run the 49ers have been. And obviously that all started with Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. And so I think that's going to be the first order of business. But like you said, I mean, there's a lot of defensive talent for him to work with. At the top of the list is Derek Stingley. As you said, number 3 overall pick in 2021. Had an abbreviated rookie season due to injury, but he's a guy who has a lot of talent. Jalen Petrie, I think, is super underrated in terms of national discourse. I mean, he had nearly 150 tackles and 5 interceptions. It's just ridiculous numbers. I mean, it's just ridiculous that he had to tackle that much as a safety. That spoke to kind of how bad they were up front in terms of stopping people. But he's another talent to work with. Christian Kirksey, I think, will flourish under a kind of a linebacker-centric coach. But I think one of the biggest things is that he's going to give this defense an identity, one that I think is going to be very multiple and versatile. Lovie Smith was known for he's known for that cover 2, right? And it never kind of changed. It was kind of ride or die by it. But in San Francisco, D'Amico Ryans had a history of kind of using different coverages, and so I think that's going to work to the players' advantage and to the team's advantage. And in terms of the offense, not always kind of knowing what to expect from the Houston Texans defense, I think that's going to help a lot. And then I think it's really nice for the Texans having a defensive-minded coach and knowing that you're going to draft a quarterback, right, at number 2. But I think having a strong run game and having a strong defense are like a young quarterback's best friend in terms of being able to kind of get your feet underneath you and get comfortable and not having too much pressure on your shoulder. And I think with the way he looks at the game, I think that's really going to benefit whoever they end up drafting.
Definitely. It's going to be interesting to watch. Of course, offensively they have a few holes there, but we kind of want to just talk about the good things when we talk about the Texans right now. But we'll leave the offense alone. As far as trying to speak on some good things, I mean, the Colts have a new head coach, and he's an offensive-minded guy, so that's a good thing for them. Shane Steichen, but of course, Frank Wright was an offensive-minded guy. We saw that last year, so we'll leave that there. Deputy editor. Okay, I'm gonna get it right one day. Deputy editor of Horseshoe Huddle, and he actually is a co-host for Locked On Colts podcast. He actually was saying that they this is the guy they wanted, and they thought it was a pipe dream to get him, but they actually got him. So, what are your thoughts on this hire here?
Yeah, I think kind of like the Texan situation, I think it's a really strong hire. I think everything you hear about Steichen is very positive. I think kind of that some of the things that have stood out are, first of all, just kind of the diversity of quarterbacks he's worked with, right? Phillip Rivers is very different from Justin Herbert, and Justin Herbert is very different from Jalen Hurts. All of them have different skills, different strengths, weaknesses, and I think in all those stops, in speaking of the Eagles and the Chargers, he's been able to get the best out of all of them, even though they are very different. And the Colts, like the Texans, they're inevitably going to draft a quarterback. It looks like they could try to trade up for one. And so having someone who has such a vast experience with working with different kinds of quarterbacks is going to be a really big thing. I think one thing that stood out from the Colts press conference was them kind of talking about how, or I think it was Shane talking about how he's really focused on emphasizing or accentuating the strengths of the quarterbacks he's had, which I think is so important. You're going to have a new guy coming in if you're Indy, and you want him to get comfortable quickly and being able to draw from those plays and from those concepts that worked for said quarterback in college is going to be a big thing. So I kind of like the hire in that regard. I do kind of like his philosophy too in terms of playing. He had said, quote, like, what was it? You throw the ball to score and you run the ball to win. And I think I think in today's NFL, having that kind of mindset is really important. And I think they have the running back, of course, that they can win with, right? And Jonathan Taylor, assuming he can get back to what he was in 2021. But I think kind of having that approach is going to be a really big thing. And so yeah, everything I've seen on Shane Steichen is very encouraging. I think he's a guy who's humble, who's kind of very appreciative of the moment. We saw him kind of get really emotional in that introductory press conference and thanking all those who have kind of helped him get to where he is. And but again, kind of going back to his work with quarterbacks, I mean, how highly that Phillip Rivers has spoken of him, kind of that really close bond that they had. I think is really encouraging if you're a Colts fan and knowing that you're going to inevitably get a quarterback and the head coach and the quarterback are going to have to be in lockstep. And I think he has the track record and the pedigree that suggests he'll be kind of successful in that department, being the Colts head coach.
Okay. All right. Now, like you mentioned, he has the propensity to work well with different style quarterbacks. Now, there are particular quarterbacks that are going to be available. That would be Mr. C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis. I mean, Anthony Richardson, if you want to throw his name in there. In your opinion, I mean, they have their pick of who they want. They'll probably have their pick of who they want, or they can try to make that happen. If they had to choose between a C.J. Stroud or Will Levis, which one in your mind do you think they would pick?
If you're saying if Bryce Young isn't on the table, because you said just Stroud and Levis.
Yes, if Bryce Young isn't on the table.
If Bryce isn't on the table, I would definitely lean towards C.J. Stroud. I think Bryce Young was clearly the best quarterback in college football, and I think was the last 2 years. And I think number 2 was C.J. Stroud. You obviously look at the weapons he had around him and the offensive line he had protecting him. I think he threw for over 40 touchdowns each of the last 2 seasons. Just ridiculous passing numbers. But I think he's very accurate quarterback. He's very decisive. He's definitely more of a traditional pocket passer, but I think in that national semifinal against Georgia, we saw him being able to move and create plays with his legs and get outside the pocket and make magic happen. So I think that Georgia game really even put C.J. Stroud kind of even higher up there in my mind. I mean, I think Bryce has always kind of been the number 1 guy for me, but I think that Georgia game, a team that had undisputably the best defense in college football, to play the way he did and to move the way he was against those fast D linemen and linebackers. I think that was really encouraging. And I think if you're the Colts, he should be your guy. Will Levis has a lot of great tools, but I think he was very inconsistent at Kentucky. And I think I just feel like C.J. Stroud has a higher ceiling. So if Bryce Young isn't on the table, right? If the Colts aren't able to get to number one, or if Bryce is just completely out of the question, I would definitely lean towards CJ. But honestly, I think if you're the Colts, that's a good problem to have, right? And I'm not saying Will Levis isn't a phenomenal talent. Like Will Levis could honestly, he could end up being the best quarterback of the bunch. I mean, if you look at it from a 5 or 10 year window, but I think where you kind of look at what the careers of all three, and if Bryce isn't on the table, I would definitely lean heavily on CJ Stroud.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, of course, we're going to talk about the news in Nashville and the offensive coordinator change. But we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're definitely going to get into that one because it's definitely been talked about a lot in Nashville. I'm touring the AFC South with your host, Mike Patton.
Did you see my picture on the artwork for the show? Well, it was taken by Joshua Silver's Photography. Let me tell you, he handled the whole shoot with class and professionalism, and he can do the same for you. Whether it's a model shoot, couples photos, headshots, maternity shoot, senior photos, or more, he has you covered. Just give him a call at 423-557-6746. Again, that's 423-557-6746. Or you can check him out on Instagram at Joshua Silver's Photography to book your shoot. Again, Joshua Silver's Photography, where class and professionalism meets great photos.
All right, and we're back. Let's see. We're going to talk about the Titans, but of course, they made some changes, during this week, of course, with the releasing of Robert Woods and Taylor Wan, which I'm pretty sure that's been on top of your headlines for this week and today.
Yeah.
But one headline that plenty are talking about is the coaching search that kind of didn't go where some people thought it would. The Titans did the coaching search. There were names thrown out there like Eric Bieniemy and Charles Nagy, and all those different names were thrown out there across the NFL. But in the end, they ended up going with a guy they brought in from the Houston Texans. He was a assistant on the team, kind of a passing coordinator, as you would say. And then they named him offensive coordinator. So basically a guy that Mike Vrabel has history with is now the offensive coordinator here in Nashville for the Tennessee Titans. Now, wow. Did you expect to see something different than what you saw?
Honestly, I did, just because the Titans had kind of gone off script when they hired Rand Carthon, right? It was a fresh voice from outside the organization, someone who could bring in fresh ideas. And I thought just because of that hire that they may kind of do something similar with the offensive coordinator position. But I think Mike Vrabel kind of reverted to kind of what everyone ultimately expected, maybe in the end, in terms of elevating someone that he was comfortable with for the third time in 5 years. There was Arthur Smith, then there was Todd Downing, and now there's Tim Kelly. I think what that move showed is what was kind of, and I wrote about this too, was Mike Vrabel wanting to double down on their offensive philosophy, even if it needs changes, right? They obviously need changes and some tweaks here and there, but I think at the core foundation of the philosophy, like the ground and pound with Derrick Henry, that they believe that can still work. And so I think kind of that's what it comes down to, right? I think I keep thinking about what the Titans offense did when Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator, right? Like two of the best offenses in franchise history. They were obviously run first. Derrick was getting 20 carries a game. but they had a very balanced, efficient, productive passing attack, obviously working in that play action to death with AJ and Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith and all those guys. And I really think Mike Vrabel wants to get back to that. It didn't work with Todd Downing, but I think he believes that they can kind of have something similar to that moving forward with Traylon Burks and Chiga Okonkwo and maybe one or two other guys that they're going to add into the fold this offseason. So I think that's really what it comes down to. I think for a lot of fans, it was obviously discouraging, right? To have someone that played a role in kind of maybe the disaster that was the offense. He had a voice on early downs and on in the red zone work. And so I think a lot of fans were maybe discouraged, but Mike kept kind of in the press conference he had, like right after the moves, he was just saying how he was confident that Tim Kelly will be able to bring new ideas. And he leaned on how he's able to kind of make some magic happen with the Houston Texans and with a rookie Davis Mills. We saw the best Davis Mills in 2021. And so I could kind of see, the vision there, but yeah, I think that's ultimately what that move says is kind of a doubling down on the offensive philosophy. Yeah, there needs to be tweaks here and there, and we need some better personnel. And but I think it was a clear indication that we could still kind of do this if maybe we're not as predictable offensively and kind of run it back, So that's kind of what my impressions were.
Yeah, definitely is going to be interesting just to see, what the changes are, what the different philosophies are, and just what the different little touches that Tim Kelly puts on this offense compared to the previous season. Because, of course, you do have guys, to be honest, just looking at the offense last year, I felt like some guys were put in positions not necessarily to succeed. For example, Robert Woods, they kind of kept lining him up outside, and I was like, okay, he's more of a traditional slot guy. Put him in the slot, you'll get the best out of him. But we never really saw him much in the slot until the last game of the season. So, that's just an example in my opinion. But we'll definitely see if he's able to utilize the players to the best of their abilities. But I do have one more question for you on the Titans. Now, being that this is another guy that Mike Vrabel is, confides in, believes in, and, the success or lack of success last season, do you think this kind of brings a little bit of heat towards Mike Vrabel with this hire?
I don't know if the hire itself necessarily brings heat on Mike Vrabel, but I do think the heat, the temperature has been turned up a bit. Amy Adams Strunk, the owner, it was she chose Mike, right? She chose his vision for this team. John Robinson, the former GM, and Mike Vrabel, they were extended at the same time, right? For their contracts to be in lockstep. And then all of a sudden, John Robinson is fired mid-season in December. And that was a clear indication of a belief in Mike's vision for the Titans and a belief in his coaching. Obviously, he had won AP Coach of the Year in 2021. But this past season was a disaster. Teams are supposed to get better as the year goes on, and the Titans got worse. They lost their last 7 games. Obviously, injuries played a role, and Todd Downing's play calling and deployment of kind of all his guys played a role. But I think kind of entering 2023, if the Titans don't kind of get back on track, this is probably going to be a big topic of discussion the following offseason. So I do think there's pressure on Mike, but I also do believe there is a lot of trust in him in the building. I do expect him to have a lot more say on kind of personnel moves moving forward with Ran Carthon. At this point, Mike Vrabel is clearly a very powerful head coach. I would say he's maybe a top 5 coach in the league in terms of what he's able to get out of the players he has available to him. And you hear Rand Carthon speak in his introductory presser, it seemed to be all about being in lockstep with Mike Vrabel. And so I do think Mike Vrabel will have a very big hand in kind of what the team looks like and not just coaching the players. Again, I don't think the decision to promote Tim Kelly necessarily has anything to do with that. I mean, obviously, if the offense looks like it did last season, then you could obviously look at, here's Mike just kind of leaning on the guys he's loyal to and not changing, and it kind of blows up in his face. So that would obviously be a discussion point. But I think this is more about the state of the Titans franchise and the direction they're headed and trying to get into Super Bowl contention. And, if he doesn't do that, if the team doesn't get back on the right track this season, I think it's going to be a really big topic of discussion moving forward.
Definitely something to keep our eyes on. But, of course, another thing to keep our eyes on is the game we're about to play at the end of the show. Of course, we have 5 questions, 2 answers, and we have 1 choice. Are you ready?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. We got Ryans or Steichen. Who do you believe in more as a head coach with the current team they have?
Who do I think will do better? Is that what the question is?
Yeah.
Who do I think will do better? I think DeMeco Ryans. And I just think because of the cap space they have, the draft capital they have, and some really good young talent that they already have on the team, and a great leader that DeMeco Ryans is known to be, I think he could have a really big impact right away. Not saying that Shane Steichen won't have a great impact, but they have a lot more issues to deal with. Everything about their offense seemed to be wrong. Their quarterback situation also has to be figured out. They have it was a very chaotic season in Indianapolis. There's a lot of questions there. And I think with DeMeco Ryans, there's just a more seamless transition or a bigger opportunity to have a massive year 1 impact. So I would say DeMeco Ryans.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to touch back on the Colts in a second. What we're going to talk about next is Mr. Ryan Tannehill. Is Ryan Tannehill going to be the starting quarterback, in your opinion, for the Tennessee Titans, or do they go in a different direction, a.k.a. a rookie?
I do believe Ryan Tannehill will be the quarterback in 2023. I believe they will extend him to obviously bring that $36.6 million cap number down. I mean, that's the 5th largest cap number of any NFL player in the league. They got to bring that down, especially to be able to have the space to kind of improve the team. But Malik Willis just showed he's not ready. There's no clear answer unless they could somehow Rand Carthon can work some magic and trade up in the draft to get one of the blue chip guys. But if none of that can happen, I think Ryan Tannehill running it back with him, extending him, and then hoping Malik develops and or eyeing the quarterbacks for 2024 would kind of be on the table. So for 2023, I do think that Ryan Tannehill will be the Titans starting quarterback.
Now, we'll say they are at the 11th pick, so, anything is possible. But, one thing, I'll go into the next one. Let's see. We're going to see 2 rookie quarterbacks starting in the AFC South this season. Is that very true to you or a false statement?
2
rookie quarterbacks.
2 rookie quarterbacks. I think by the middle of the year, yes. I mean, I could definitely see in both cases having kind of bridge guys where kind of the quarterback, the young quarterback will have time to develop a little bit and really get a grasping of the offense. Like, I would not be so surprised, like, for instance, to see the Texans go after a guy like a Jimmy G. I've seen some people even throw out Derek Carr, although I don't think that's as likely, but Derek Carr has a lot of ties to the Texans front office in terms of Nick Caserio and whatnot. So even in both cases, I do see maybe a veteran quarterback being kind of in the mix. But I think by the middle of the year, we could see two starting quarterbacks, two first-year rookie quarterbacks. But to start the year, I would say maybe one starts. One of them starts.
Okay. All right. The Titans offense this season coming up with Tim Kelly at the helm. We're kind of touching on that one more time. Do you think there's more of the focus on the running game, or do you think the passing game will be a little bit more present for them?
Well, I think they have to have more of a passing game, right? I mean, it has to be a threat to even open up the run game more. I think this offense is still going to run through Derrick Henry, even coming off of that Jones fracture in 2021. He came back and showed that he's still one of the best running backs in the league. And so I do think the offense will continue to run through him, but I expect Treylon Burks to make big steps. I expect Chigakonkwo to make big steps. Kyle Phillips could kind of show that potential he did in preseason and training camp. And then I think they're going to add some more talent, maybe in the draft or free agency or both. So I do think the passing game will be more prevalent, or at least more of a threat. But I do think this will still be a run-focused team.
Gotcha. And I got one more question. You talked about the Colts earlier, and you talked about them kind of a little bit not having it together, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But I'm going to mention one guy that I think has the potential to be big time. I mean, box office with this offense. And it's not Michael Pittman Jr. It's tight end Jelani Woods. Now, do you think he's going to be a start? I would say this. In this offense, you had Goddard play the tight end in the offense for the Eagles the last couple of years, and he stepped out and he's played well. Do you think Jelani Woods is that next tight end in his offense, Shane Steichen's offense, to kind of be that guy for the Colts?
Yeah, I expect Jelani Woods to make a really big step. He's had some very productive games as a rookie last season. He's a very big target, a very athletic target, has great hands, runs routes pretty well. And I think when you have a young quarterback, when you have someone kind of 10, 15 yards downfield who you can trust, or maybe even like a check down option, get some guaranteed chunk yards, right? I think having a tight end you can trust is really important. And so I do expect Jelani Woods to have a really big role in the Colts offense next season. I think you see, I think just in general, right, we see a lot more pass catching tight ends, and we see how important it is for young or rising quarterbacks to have those tight ends, right? Whether it's Patrick Mahomes having Kelsey, or Lamar Jackson having Mark Andrews, or even going back, Tom Brady having Rob Gronkowski, Trevor Lawrence having Evan Ingram, Jalen Hurts having Goddard. I think if you have that guy you can really trust in the intermediate to short passing game, especially as a rookie quarterback, I think that can work to your advantage. So I do expect him to continue to ascend this coming season.
It's definitely going to be something to watch. Him and Chig definitely were two tight ends that I was excited about coming into this upcoming season, their rookie season. So, definitely going to be something to watch. It could be the division of tight ends potentially very, very soon. And that's the end of the show. I want to thank you for coming on, Ben. And if you can, tell everyone where they can find your work and where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, first of all, Mike, thanks again for having me on. For those listening, you can find me on Twitter at Ben Y Arthur. That's just Ben and Arthur, and with a Y in between, all one word, on Twitter. Same thing on Instagram. And then in terms of my work, you can find me on foxsports.com, and all my Jags, Titans, Colts, and what I'm forgetting, the fourth team, the AFC South teams, all the AFC South content, you can find me on foxsports.com. So thanks again, Mike, for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming on, and thank you everyone for tuning in to Touring the AFC South with your host, Mike Patton. We're out.